Welcome to Yehoshua's Daf Yomi Shiur, where the Daf continues daily until the complete revelation of Mashiach ben David, Messiah, the son of David. Today we'll be studying Tractate Chullin, page 116, that is, also known as Chullin Kuf Tes Zayin. Chullin 116, starting with side A, top of the page, with the words Chada mechada kule v'chumra parchinan. Chad mechada kule v'chumra parchinan kol duhula parchinan chad v'tar tefilu kol duhu parchinan. As stated above, for any kal v'chomer inference of a single source from a single source, one can refute the derivation by invoking a unique leniency in the supposedly stringent case and a stringency in the lenient one. But one cannot refute it by simply mentioning any aspect unique to the first source. And for inferences of one source from two other sources, one can even refute the derivation by mentioning any aspect unique to the first source. For inferences of one source from three other sources, as suggested here, only if the inference reverts to its starting point, as each source possesses its own unique stringency, and the halacha is then derived by analogy from the common element of all of them. Can one refute the inference by mentioning any factor unique to the source cases? But if the inference does not revert, one can refute the derivation only by invoking a leniency and a stringency, but one cannot refute it by mentioning any unique factor. The suggested inference does not revert, since the prohibition of diverse kinds in a vineyard possesses no stringent element that the other sources lack. Therefore, the fact that all the source cases involve produce is immaterial, and the inference from diverse kinds in a vineyard stands. So when it the Gemara suggests, but let one refute the inference as follows. What is unique about diverse kinds in a vineyard? They are unique in that they had no time that they were fit. Shasa kosher means if something is forbidden now, but it had a time that it was not forbidden. Okay, an example would be like, let's just say something that's when it's forbidden to touch on the Sabbath, a muktzah thing. Wait a few hours, and then there'll be a time that it's okay. So that's what shasa kosher means. Okay, so when it comes to kalayim, things that are mixed together, there's no time that they're ever kosher. It's always forbidden. The produce is forbidden as soon as it begins to grow, whereas meat and milk are prohibited only when they are cooked together. So there was a time when the meat and the milk were prohibited, were kosher. If meat's by itself, kosher meat, let's say, and milk was by itself, kosher. So, no pun intended, but it's a shasa kosher. Okay? But if you put them together, no. Then it's prohibited. Ravada Bar Hava says, if this suggestion was not employed, that is to say that even the roots of diverse kinds in a vineyard are prohibited, including the seeds and saplings from which the hybrid plants grow. And they too had a time when they were fit, before taking root. So he wants to say that even the saplings, there was a shasa kosher when they were little seeds and before they actually grew together. That would be comparable to meat and milk. And they too at a time, consequently the premise of the question must be false. Meisiv Rav Shemaya bar Ziro, Amavir Tzitz Nakuf Bakerem, Im Hoisif Masayim Asur, Hoisif In, Hoisif Lo. Rav Shemaya bar Zera raises an objection to this conclusion from the Mishnah in Kalayim 7:8. If one transfers a perforated pot with seeds in it into a vineyard, if the size of the plant growing in the pot increases by 1/200th of its previous size, such that the permitted original plant is less than 200 times the amount of the prohibiting growth and insufficient to nullify it, the produce is prohibited due to the prohibition against planting diverse kinds in the vineyard. One may infer, if it increases, yes, it is prohibited, but if it does not increase, no, it is not permitted. Apparently, only the additional growth is prohibited, not the planted seeds or the saplings. Abaye said 2 verses are written, meaning 2 separate terms in one verse indicate 2 separate prohibitions. The verse states, "You shall not sow your vineyard with 2 different kinds of seed, lest the growth of the seed that you will sow be forfeited together with the increase of the vineyard." Deuteronomy 22:9. It is written, "Lest the growth be forfeited," indicating that it is prohibited only if it has grown. And it is written of the seed from which it can be inferred that it is prohibited immediately when it is planted and takes root. How can these texts be reconciled? The Abaye explains, if it was planted initially in the vineyard, it becomes prohibited immediately upon taking root. But in a case where it was planted elsewhere and brought into the vineyard later, for example, in a perforated pot, then one must distinguish if its size increases in the vineyard. Yes, the growth is prohibited. If its size does not increase, no, it is not prohibited. Masdisandelo ki haitna tanya. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, Pasar b'chavasor v'chilo mutar b'ano shenemar, ki yam kadosh atav nemar. Lehalan b'anshe kodesh tihiu li. The Gemara notes the Mishnah, which states that meat cooked in milk is prohibited for benefit, is not in accordance with the opinion of this Tana. As it is taught in a Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, it is prohibited to eat meat cooked in milk, but it is permitted to derive benefit from it, as it is stated, "For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk," Deuteronomy 14:21. And the verse states elsewhere, "And you shall be holy people to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by animals. In the field you shall throw it to the dogs. Cast not which is holy to the dogs." Exodus. No, that's a different thing. I'm saying, I'll say the Exodus is throw it to the dogs. Exodus 22:30. The use of the word holy in both verses indicates that just as here with regard to a trefa, it is prohibited to eat it, but one is permitted to derive benefit from it, as one may give it to the dogs. So to here with regard to meat cooked in milk, it is prohibited to eat it, but one is permitted to derive benefit from it. Rabbi Akiva the Mishnah states, Rabbi Akiva says, cooking the meat of an undomesticated animal or bird in milk is not prohibited by Torah law, as it is stated, "You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk." Exodus 23:19, also in 34:26, and Deuteronomy 14:21. 3 times excluding an undomesticated animal, a bird, and a non-kosher animal. The Gemara raises a difficulty. Other halachot have already been derived from these mentions of the word kid in accordance with the statement of Shmuel, C113b. Kasor Kiva, Isur Chalalisor, Chelo Mesot Tzich Krosh Lirgadi, Mial Yehu, Ayatu Leoko Lehu, Prali Chaya, Voiful Behema Timea. The Gemara answers for Akiva maintains, in general, that a prohibition takes effect, even where another prohibition already exists, and therefore forbidden fat and the meat of a dead animal, which are already prohibited, do not require a verse to teach that the prohibition of meat and milk applies to them. Furthermore, there is no need to derive from a verse that a fetus is included, as it is a full-fledged kid. Consequently, all 3 mentions of the word remain for him to expound that they serve to exclude an undomesticated animal and a bird and a non-kosher animal. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Ne'emar lo tochlu ma'ika bein Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. The Mishnah further teaches that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says it is stated, "You shall not eat of any animal carcass," Deuteronomy 14:21, and in the same verse it is stated, "You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk." This indicates that the meat of an animal that is subject to be prohibited due to the prohibition of eating an unslaughtered carcass is prohibited to cook in milk. Consequently, one might have thought that it is prohibited to cook in milk the meat of a bird, which is subject to this prohibition. Therefore, the verse states, "In its mother's milk," to include a bird which has no mother's milk. The Gemara asks, what difference is there between the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who excludes a bird from the prohibition of meat and milk due to the phrase "in its mother's milk," and the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who comes to the same conclusion as Rabbi Yossi Aglili based upon the phrase "you shall not cook a kid"? The Gemara explains there is a difference between them with regard to an undomesticated animal. Rabbi Yossi Aglili maintains that the prohibition of cooking the meat of an undomesticated animal no complies with Torah law, as an undomesticated animal has mother's milk. But Rabbi Akiva maintains that the prohibition of cooking the meat of an undomesticated animal milk applies only by rabbinic law, as it is excluded by the phrase "you shall not cook a kid." Ibois ema of Ika beinayhu Rabbi Akiva sava chayav oif einon min hatoyre homer rabban nesiri Rabbi Yossi Aglili sava oif afilu min rabban nami lo yasir. If you wish to say instead that there is a difference between them with regard to the meat of a bird itself, Rabbi Akiva maintains that the prohibitions of an undomesticated animal and a bird do not apply by Torah law, but it may be inferred from this statement that they are prohibited by rabbinic law. And Rabbi Yossi Aglili maintains that a bird is not prohibited even by rabbinic law. Tanya Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Eliezer Yakoysin Eitzim Laslis Pechamin Laslis Barzel Bimkoim Rabbi Yossi Aglili Hayoichlin Basar Oif Becholov. The Gemara notes that distinction is also taught in a Braita in the locale of Rabbi Eliezer, where his ruling was followed. They would cut down trees on Shabbat to prepare charcoal from them with which to light a fire, to fashion iron tools with which to circumcise a child on Shabbat. Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, not only does the mitzvah of circumcision override Shabbat, but also any action required for the preparation of the tools necessary for the circumcision likewise overrides Shabbat. My question is, could that all be done in one day? It seems like it's more than just a one-day process. To fashion a tool, to make it ready to be circumcised, you can do that all in one day? Okay, anyway, it's my own question. The Braita adds, in the locale of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, they would eat bird meat cooked in milk. Evidently, Rabbi Yossi Aglili maintains that the prohibition of meat cooked in milk does not include birds. Levi klal be Yosef rishba Yisrael kamei reisha Titavas b'charav avalo mar lehu v'lo midi Yisrael kamei Rabbi amar le amai lo tishmatinu. The Gemara relates that Levi happened to come to the house of Yosef the bird hunter. Yosef the bird hunter. Wow. Yosef the bird hunter. You don't say. Okay, they served him the head of a peacock in milk, and he did not say anything to them. When Levi came before Yehuda Hanasi said to him, "Why did you not excommunicate these people who eat bird meat cooked in milk, contrary to the decree of the sages?" Amar le'asrei Rabbi Yehuda b'serehu v'imina dorash lo Rabbi Yossi Aglili de'ar yazoif shein lach alevim. Levi said to him, it was in the locale of Yehuda ben Betera, and I said, perhaps he taught them that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who said that the phrase "in its mother's milk" serves to exclude a bird, which does not have mother's milk. If so, I could not permit them, and I could not prohibit it to them, and I certainly could not excommunicate them for following the ruling. Looks like he didn't answer him back, so it looks like his answer stood. Okay, new Mishnah, bottom line. Before we go into the daf, starting a new daf, new Mishnah, we'll go into 116b. But before we start the Mishnah, I'll take a little break, and during this break, let us consult with AI. Since we're in the topic of what's it called?
What specific question or task do you need help with?
Halodi. Okay. I'm looking for a word that uses the same letters as the word milk, M-I-L-K, same letters, and it's an actual word. Does such a word exist that uses the four letters of M-I-L-K rearranged in any order?
No, there aren't any standard English words that use the letters M, I, L, and K rearranged.
Do you know why that is?
It's just how the language developed. Certain consonant clusters and vowel combinations don't form recognizable words in English, and milk is one of those cases where no other arrangement creates a valid word.
This is in stark contrast to the word meat.
That's true. Words with common letters like M, E, and T tend to have more possibilities for rearrangement than words with less common combinations like those in milk.
M-E-A-T can be team.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of how versatile those letters are.
So why is it that meat can be team and milk doesn't have any correlation to it in that way?
It comes down to phonotactics, which are the rules governing how sounds can be combined in a language. The combination of M, I, L, and K just doesn't form any other valid sequences in English, while M, E, and T naturally flow into multiple familiar patterns.
What you're saying is true, and I would consider it basic, because I'm looking for the deeper reason why what you said is true is true.
At the deepest level, phonotactics aren't just about individual sounds, but about the structural constraints of syllables in a language. In English, syllables follow a strict pattern of an onset, a nucleus, which is usually a vowel, and a coda. The arrangement of M, I, L, and K doesn't fit the allowed patterns for either consonant clusters at the beginning or end of a syllable in English, which is why no other valid words can be formed.
Okay, all right, I guess that's as far as you'll go. But what I'm looking for is, why is it that an L combined with a K and an I, I know what you're saying is true, but I'm looking for the actual feelings, the actual meanings of the letters, what they imply, what they mean at a metaphysical level. Okay, it's probably beyond your pay grade, so I think we'll call it a day. Thanks for your help. All right, let's continue. And what's really good about AI is that they're just, so helpful and nice and whatever. They're very polite and just, I think Should we continue on, or should we call it a day here? Let's call it a daf here and continue on next daf.